Hello, this is Joy Hancox, bringing you a little more of the story of my journey of my research projects over the years. Today I would like to talk to you about another painting, a second allegorical painting. But before I actually introduce the painting, I have to say that I need to talk to you about it in a rather different way. And the reason that I'm doing this is that the first allegorical painting was to talk about the first folio of Shakespeare and to say clearly that my interpretation of that allegorical painting was that Francis Bacon really was the true author of the Shakespearean plays. Now, this second allegorical painting, I think, confirms what I said in the first one. I'm not suggesting that it's been done by the same painter. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm not going to actually talk about the painting itself today, because it's absolutely vital that I should discuss with you some of the reasons why I am so certain that it is a true interpretation of mine. And to do that, I need to talk about certain features of my work that have accompanied me through the years, some people from whom I've learned so much, that have helped me to come to the conclusion that I have about this painting. So I won't actually be showing it today, but it will be the very next video after this one. I want to tell you of some of the people that have accompanied me through the journey over the years, that have helped me to learn more about historical features that maybe have not been seen or talked about before, and have helped me to form the conclusion that I have about the second painting. And to do that, I'm going to tell a different story, really. And to begin, I would like to introduce you to Sarah Bolger. Now, Sarah Bolger was the companion of Eleanora Atherton, the great-granddaughter of John Byrom. And we've talked about Eleanora Atherton before, because she was the inheritant of the vast inheritance that she inherited from the Byrom family. Now, she had a companion, as I say. Sarah Bolger was her companion for over 33 years. And during that time, she was the person that learnt Byrom's shorthand, which was never published in his day. She translated his own personal diaries over a period of 30-odd years. And she published them in 4 volumes. Now, they were published by the Chesham Society, and the instruction was that Eleanora Atherton, who was the heiress to the whole estate, instructed that she was to destroy, or the manuscripts, the original manuscripts of the diaries, were to be destroyed of John Byrom's. Now, given that she was working over 33 years on that, I would have thought that she would have been really rather reluctant to destroy everything in the wake of her hard work. No, that is why she became of interest to me, because I knew that John Byrom was an extraordinary Scarlet Pimpernel type of character. He never owned a property. He taught his shorthand to the great and the good, and I learned how to transcribe it. myself because I managed to acquire a deciphering code of that shorthand. Now, really, Sarah Bolger, in working for Eleanor Atherton, she really was very, very close to Eleanor Atherton, and Eleanor Atherton did leave her a bequest that was sufficient for her to buy a hotel in Bournemouth, which she called after her mistress Atherton. But equally so, when I researched her, I found that she really had siphoned off, I think, or not siphoned off, but she kept some of the memorabilia that was associated with her mistress and the home in which she spent so much time. And I have to introduce you now to one of the bequests that I found that she herself had kept quite apart from any of the recognised inheritance specimens and rights of Eleanor Atherton's will, of whom I have got a copy of that will. But I've also got a copy of Sarah Bolger's will. And this special book was part of that Sarah Bolger's inheritance, and I have found that absolutely extraordinary. It has been, as it were, the foundation of a lot of my work, but it was a secret diary, so it was John Byrom's own, and it's written in his shorthand, as I say, of which I have learned to transcribe. Now I'm going to introduce you, I'm going to show you the first page of this secret diary. It's here, and I've opened the page at it. There are a few blank pages before, but here I have the first page, and I was absolutely stunned when I transcribed this and learned what it was about. I'm going to read you the translation of my interpretation of what the shorthand says. To the fair unknown, after seeing her at the music booth at Stourbridge Fair. And I'm not going to translate all that, but I will jump to the last verse. Judge now my passion by severest truth, and read what rigours age can blame. If I have erred, inform a willing youth. At best mistaken was my flame. Is love a crime? Then teach me to adore, and zeal share what passion was before. Now here we have the first page of Byrom's secret memoirs, To the Fair Unknown. Who was she then? Well, it turns out that she was visiting a concert incognito with her ladies-in-waiting. This was the then Princess of Wales, the wife. She was the wife of the then Prince of Wales, who became George II. And she and Byrom were sharing a concert evening at Stourbridge Fair, and he met her, but she was incognito. Well, I told you in the last video, or I said in the last video, that Tom Siddle, who was the tenant of my own property, went to the gallows and was executed, and he could have saved his life and probably those of some of his colleagues, but he didn't. He was loyal to the cause, and I made a vow that I would seek out what the secret was that he knew. And here we have a clue, because John Byrom had a liaison with the then Princess of Wales. And what they did was, eventually she had to confess who she was, and she lived in Leicester Fields in London near the Strand, and actually they tenanted a house near to the palace, and it was in the name of Thomas Siddle, the tenant of my property. So here we have the first introduction in a secret diary in shorthand that Sarah Bolger had, she'd kept it despite the fact that Eleanor Atherton had asked her to destroy the manuscripts of his diary. Now, the rest of the book, some of which are blank pages, I'm going to jump now to the last page of the same manuscript. And here we have a verse, you can see, it's right at the end of this manuscript, and it reads as follows. I transcribed it from the shorthand. It says, "Our townsmen, now that they are dead and gone, leave heaven to pass the honourable sentence on. Martyrs are not still. He who keeps the gates of his blessed gates may open if he please. Strive to get in thyself. Never mock that I wrote on the wrong side to keep a neighbourly oath." Now, that may be rather difficult to understand and comprehend. I understood it as soon as I read it, as soon as I transcribed it, because what Byrom was doing, he knew that Tom Siddle had acted loyally on his behalf. And of course, Tom Siddle was executed along with several other Manchester men from the Manchester Regiment because they adhered to the Jacobite cause. And here is Byrom, who had had an affair with the Hanoverian princess, an opposite faction to the Jacobite cause. And here he was inviting the martyrs, as he described them, who had lost their lives. He was inviting them to leave heaven and make a judgment. Now, what he's saying is, martyrs are not still. He who keeps the gates may open if he please. He's inviting, if it were, God to open the gates and invite these martyrs who were true to their cause to act in a sort of a judgmental way and to help those who were supportive of their cause. That is what John Byrom is doing here in that verse. Now, what I am saying is now, today, is I'm inviting those martyrs are not still to any particular generation. They go on. And I think that I have been helped by similar martyrs, that most of whom have gone to heaven or not with us any longer, and they have helped me on my journey to understand what I am talking to you about today. So they are martyrs, my martyrs, and they've left heaven to help me in my journey, and I firmly believe that. So I am introducing you to this because this is what Byrom put at the end of his own secret diary. And actually, in reading you the last verse, he knew that in some ways he perhaps shouldn't have had the affair with the Princess of Wales. And I, in a way, forgive him because she did not say who she was. And so he was a young man who found her attractive at that time, incognito as she was, and he fell in love with her. Now, that's what he's saying. Is love a crime? Then teach me to adore, and zeal share what passion was before. Now, in showing you that book and demonstrating it, that has come to me along with other artifacts through Sarah Bolger. Now, the actual introduction was giving you a general background to what I wanted to talk to you about today. And I want to introduce you to somebody who was indirectly connected with Sarah Bolger, but obviously wasn't Sarah Bolger. Now, I investigated everything to do with her dependence and what happened to her own legacies. I was looking for anything that linked Sarah Bolger with the work that I was about to follow. And what happened was that in getting a copy of her will, I was able to trace her to Stourport in Worcestershire. And the reason why I did that is because in her will, she left some of her personal inheritance from Eleanor Atherton to Mary Ann Degg. And Mary Ann Degg was the lady's maid to Eleanor Atherton. So it was a bit of an in-house legacy transference. And they found themselves, I found one of Sarah Bolger's sisters became part of the employment of Flora MacDonald, the Jacobite companion to Bonnie Prince Charlie, or so the story goes. And she went to work for the Stanley Baldwin, the Prime Minister's, the former Prime Minister's dependents or ancestors at the time. And so I found myself in Stourport. Now, what happened, I was investigating all kinds of strands to try to get factual information from that area. And what happened was that one of the relatives of Stanley Baldwin, the Prime Minister, for whom one of Sarah Bolger's family went to work for, he found himself getting in touch with me, and that was Sir Miles Huntingdon Whiteley. Now, Sir Miles Huntingdon Whiteley was married to the great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria. And he came to value very much the way that I worked and investigated. And he made arrangements for me to visit the library at Windsor Castle. And what I wanted to do there, and I was very, very grateful to him for setting this up, I was able to look at private papers of the Princess of Wales. And it was through Miles Huntingdon Whiteley that I was able to do that. Now, he and I became, familiar with each other's way of working, and I have to say that through him, the family of the Baldwin inheritance arranged for me to do the memoirs of Stanley Baldwin's daughter, Lady Lorna, the daughter of Stanley Baldwin. Now, I couldn't understand why they chose me, but they did choose me to do this. But I used to spend quite a lot of time at that time interviewing her and recording the interviews. For whatever reason, the family eventually decided that they did not want these memoirs published. And so that was their decision. And so even though I'd been commissioned to do them, I hold the transcripts of all those interviews with Lady Lauder Howard, as she was. Now, during those interviews, I'm not at liberty to discuss them really, but I knew that the family had had connections with wartime people who in the Second World War were very eminent in their own right. So that was an experience that added a considerable amount of richness to my own research program. And the letters that I was were made available to me through Windsor Castle also added a richness to my own work. So Sir Miles Huntingdon Whiteley, who corresponded with me right up until his death in 2019, is very much a part of my legacy of my research. He accompanied me to the Science Museum at times and knew all about the brass plates and followed very, very closely the work that I had been doing on the globe design. In fact, he gave me a model of the globe that I still cherish, and that is one of the most important martyrs, if you like. I call them a martyr that has, I feel, is still supporting me today. So I've talked about Miles Huntingdon Whiteley, Sir Miles Huntingdon Whiteley, and now I'd like to talk to you about another person who made their way to my home. And this was Ian Taylor from Toronto in Canada, and he had written to me a review about the Byrom collection, and it wasn't simply his observations, it was an analysis of the whole of my book. It was more like a bibliography in his own right, and observations of every single argument that I made about the book. And actually, he made an observation about one of my main contributors, which was Neville Barker Cryer, as a senior Freemason. I'm not going to comment on what he said about him at the moment, but it resulted in Freemasons, a group of Freemasons, visiting his office in Toronto in Canada on my behalf. And that is a fact. And here I was now having had a request from him to visit me on the way back from the Ukraine, where he'd been given a series of lectures. He was a scientist, by the way, and in his own right. And so he wanted to come and see me about the collection itself. Now, he arrived on this particular day, and the first thing he did, I always entertain people, they visit me for sort of seminars, private and what have you, and usually we have a procedure here where he was taken to his quarters, and before he did that on this occasion, having arrived, he wanted to present to me a copy of a book, which he had obviously designed. It was designed that he should deliver to me on that day, and it was called The Sabines at Riverbank, and he gave it to me practically within 5 minutes of him arriving at my home, and he wanted to draw my attention to the fact that it was, and I read it to you, it says you can see all the indications. This is a much used book, this, and it's Welcome to Riverbank, World of Architectural Acoustics copy. Best regards, and it's signed by the author, John Copic. And this was out of the blue to me because I'd never heard of them and I didn't know why it should be given to me. But he gave it to me, and of course I've come to learn that the Riverbank is a very, very special place in America where they do study this particular science very, very carefully. He went to his room and he came back, and he was settled in his room because he was staying overnight, and then he wanted me to read a particular page, and he wanted me to read it within minutes, really, or a short while of him being here in my home. And when I looked at it, it was quite clear that the Riverbank people had access to a lot of the original material of Francis Bacon. And this is what he wanted to draw to my attention very quickly on his arrival. Now, Ian Taylor remained a constant correspondence to me and was a contributor to some of my later books. And from him, he was a publisher. He published books in his own right. He was a scientist, TFE Publishing in Canada, and he regularly sent me material from them. Now, this was another strange, if you like, arrival of somebody that really had seen the copy of the Byrom collection over in Canada, and took it upon himself to request to come and study with me certain aspects of that material and to give me a gift. I have to say that the third person that I'm going to mention that has been another martyr in a way to my work, it came about this way. It was in 2002, 10 years after I had published the Byrom collection. And I had a phone call, as most of us do that do this kind of work frequently. I had a phone call from the Science Museum in London. And this was a request that I should see and have as a visitor a Dr. Michael Hunter. And when it was explained to me why this and why it was necessary and why they were requesting that I should do this, it was because the United States Naval Observatory in Washington, America, had received a request from then to the Science Museum in London. And this was, as I say, 10 years after I'd published the Byrom collection. And it was that they had got a copy of my book at the Naval Observatory, and that in looking through it on a particular day, they had found an illustration that matched up with one of their own that they had acquired from the Science Museum at some point earlier. And they matched. And I think that they were curious as to how I had come about to have this illustration in my own book. Now, I had spent some years liaising with the Science Museum about the Byrom collection of geometric drawings. In fact, I had identified the brass plates, and we know that as a result of that, the brass plates, with my help, they were dated. Now, I don't want to go down that road at all. It's not necessary at this point. But during those investigations, I had been shown a manuscript which we will describe as 471. And in that manuscript, there were copies that were identical to the copies of the prints in the Byrom collection. And it was one of those that I'd reproduced in my own book to show and demonstrate the similarity between them. And here we have now a representative that the Science Museum had were asking me if I would see him to confirm the identity of these particular drawings. Now, when he came, I mean, I knew of the United States Naval Observatory. What I didn't know, I'm jolly well I found out before he made his visit. And recently I've had cause to get that file out again because of my most recent, we're talking about 2002, 10 years after my publication. Well, that's 22 years ago. Now, what I found out was that the United States Naval Observatory, housed in Washington, had very close by the Vice President of America lived, and they specialized in collecting and collating information to do with unidentified flying objects and space travel. They were the people that collected it all. And what I found out was, and it's very topical now, at this moment in time, but at the time when I investigated how they could possibly have a copy of my book and why they should have it, I learned that they were they collected and investigated the whole phenomena of unidentified flying objects, and they were the people that had clearly been given a particular responsibility, or they were, let's just say generally, they were investigating what came to be known as the Majestic 12 documents. And this was all to do with the same thing. Now, I actually, at the time, 22 years ago, I I created a file on the visit that I had from Dr. Michael Hunter. And he came here and he spent the day with me. And yes, he bought copies of the said drawing from the said manual or book and mine, and we were able to compare it all. Now, he spent a day here working on the drawings, and that was in 2020. This was in 2002, in July. And he left here after he spent the day with me, and I happened to say, and have you got another appointment? And he said, yes, he was going to the Duke of Devonshire's in Chatsworth House. And now I would like to introduce you to another person who I would like to describe as a martyr. To me, anyway, he was and is. His name is the Reverend Neville Barker Cryer. And I first came to know him through Richard Lee, one of the three holies, as they were called, the authors of the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. And Richard Lee introduced me to the Reverend Neville Barker Cryer, and he, although he was a reverend in his own right, he was one of the most senior Freemasonry authors of international fame during his lifetime. And he came for seminars here for 23 years, right up until his death. And we would have very studied sessions on topics that were of mutual interest. And on one such occasion, I did ask him whether he had come across a book entitled Dark Mission. And I had had my attention drawn to that book, and it was this copy that I had was published in 2009. So we're talking about 7 years after my last visitor that I've talked about, Dr. Michael Hunter. And on this occasion, I asked the Reverend Cryer whether he had heard of this book, The Dark Mission. And he said no. And the reason why I was asking him was because my attention had been drawn to it, as I say, because in one particular chapter they were referring to a topic that I had discussed in the third video. And this was, I mean, the book was considered very, very controversial at the time, and it was about, it was by two authors, the names of which I'm not going to keep giving names and names. The book title was Dark Mission, and anybody interested in it can look it up. It was a very famous book in its own way. But I had been drawn to its attention because in it they were talking about the NASA program of astronauts visiting the moon and various space missions. And in it, in chapter 5 actually, blow me if they hadn't included a description of meetings that had taken place between people associated with the planning of these missions and the astronauts themselves. And they were discussing John Dee and Edward Kelly and some of the seances that they were conducting in their own lifetime, which I have mentioned and talked about in my previous video. And this was the meetings and seances with Medimi, where they were contacting spiritualists and out of space rituals with entities not of this world. And you will remember that I talked about one such seance, and they were talking about this in this book, not of my description of course, but meetings that they were having had an opportunity to study the Enochian codes. And when I saw this, I was really deeply concerned, because in the Dark Mission they were talking about rituals which I found really very disturbing. Not in the same context as I had discussed them in my own reading of John Dee's diary and my application to such sessions in my own videos. And so when I mentioned this book to the Reverend Cryer, I did it in the with the feeling that I was rather concerned about this inclusion. And the Reverend Cryer had not got a copy of the book. He hadn't heard of it, but he did acquire a copy himself. And unbeknownst to me, he wrote to the managing editor of the Scottish Rite journal in Washington in America. He wrote to him mentioning some of the points that I had raised. And so the editor, who was a 33-degree Freemason, Scottish Rite one himself, replied to Neville Barker Cryer, who very generously gave me copies of all that correspondence. And I have to say that the fact that Neville Barker Cryer had chosen to make contact with the 33-degree editor of the Journal of the Scottish Rite in Washington reminded me then of the visit of Dr. Michael Hunter, who had also visited the navigational premises in Washington himself. So to me, I was beginning to think that my work, my project work, was approaching a different level. And really, I felt, quite, I'm not saying privileged, but I was becoming more concerned about the width and breadth of the interpretation of the collection of drawings that I had. I was particularly interested in the fact that the managing editor of the Washington Scottish Rite Journal was based in Washington, because if you recall, earlier in this video, I was talking about Dr. Michael Hunter, who visited the United States Naval Observatory, which was concerned with a similar drawing of mine that had appeared in their own records, and that was also based in Washington. And linking these two incidents together, I found that I was in some buildings in Washington, very high order, my work was being mentioned. Now, reflecting on these two visitors, as it were, Dr. Michael Hunter and then the Reverend Neville Cryer, I was beginning to think that the research that I was involved with was very much hitting a sort of a wider reflective audience. And I then felt that very seriously about the knowledge that was contained in what I was dealing with. And I have always felt that for the years that I've been involved with these projects, that if I felt that I was making a valuable contribution to the sciences and culture in any small way, then my life would have been worthwhile. I felt if the knowledge was taking things a little bit further, because of the work and study that I was doing, then who would want any more than that? And now we must jump to from 2009 to 2013. Of course, there were lots of other people that came in between. I mean, I was always having visitors of one kind or another to do with my research, but I'm selecting those that I think are almost continuous in a thread of learning. And what happened was, 2013, I received a request to take part in a television series. And what they wanted me to do was to give an interview about my interpretation of the globe drawings. Not that they were used, as we know. The current globe in London is not according to my interpretation of the globe drawings, historic though they may be. It was decided that they should not be used and were not. However, I was invited to give an interview about my sacred geometry interpretations of some of these drawings, the globe included. And at first I was really rather reluctant, because I didn't want to talk about the globe was up and running and it was successful, and I didn't really want to disturb that arrangement, not really. However, I was persuaded by the producer of that program to give an interview in the Anchor Inn, which is just a little positioned a little bit lower than the globe, the side of the River Thames in London. And so I completed that interview, and it was shown in that it was episode 6, or part of episode 6, in series 1 of the Forbidden History, shown on the BBC. And that was shown on in the end of October, beginning of November 2013. And apparently it was circulated broadly and widely, and in fact it is available now as part of their series for people who choose to purchase it. Anyway, the point is that the producer of that program, Bruce Burgess, a very eminent, personable producer, came to discuss the format that my interview would take. He came to Manchester to see me here, and this was planned very carefully. Now, so the program was shown, and it was repeated and repeated yet again, and it was quite a popular program, really. But I was only part of the series, and so there were lots of others that were taking part in the same, even in the same program. Now, what I did not know at the time was really the experience of Bruce Burgess. Why should I know? He was a very competent producer, but I came to know that he had produced and was responsible for a program which won an award, and it took place and was filmed in America, in New Mexico, and it was concerned in principle about Area 51. This was a film totally about UFOs landing in 1947 and thereabouts in New Mexico, and Bruce Burgess created a film around it and won an award for it. Now, I could never have known that. And linking, as I have done, my research from year to year, I began to wonder whether the interest in my described interview was always totally the intention. I wondered whether there was another interest in my work, because I did find that a shareholder of that film company was a very distinguished Jewish family, which I won't name on this program for the moment, if I may, but they are very, very well known, and they were extremely well known to me. And I couldn't help but wonder whether the interest in my work was totally as described in my interview. Now, there are other reasons why I began to wonder about that, which has to follow on and will follow on from what I am talking about today. My researches had begun looking into the past of my own property here. It was an absolute accident that I started the research in the first place. It was really because of us having central heating installed. And now I've talked about some of the people that have accompanied me on my journey. I refer to them as martyrs because they're no longer here in this world. But I feel as though they're accompanying me on this very journey that I'm taking now. And this is going to be a follow-up few words that I'm going to say, which are even, I have to say it, even more incredible, because I'm referring to Bruce Burgess's film and the interview, and I'm also stating and reminding the viewer that he was responsible for the film based at Area 51. Of course, Bruce Burgess, as the producer of the series in which I was connected, was not really anything to do with what Area 51. This was in a way incidental, because he'd done that film, he'd made that film years before. And the film is entirely based on Area 51, but it's called Dreamland. That is the title of the film. And he didn't mention it to me when I was, I've only found this out later. And then, of course, as the journey has progressed, the link between Area 51 and other aspects of my work, it is quite peculiar. I use the word peculiar because I don't want to use the word dramatic, but it is very unusual. Well, unusual. It may be that it's usual for us all, that these coincidences are something that we should all be aware of, that happen in our lives. I don't think necessarily is that I am so exclusive that is simply happened to me. I'm sure in some regards it is likely to happen to us all at different times for different reasons. Now, I have to now refer to something equally special, and I have to be very careful that I don't give the wrong impression. I don't want to give the wrong impression, I never do, and would hate to do it now, because it's very, very significant. But we're jumping now to 2016. The film, as it were, was filmed in 2013, but I'm now jumping to 2016, when I received a phone call from my agent in London, based in Soho, to say that they had received a package from me, for me, from America. And given that I was interviewing a producer from America on the following Tuesday, I thought it might be something to do with them. So I asked my agent in London to open what they had received as a package for me. And they did that, but it was nothing to do with these people who were coming from New York on the following Tuesday to study the globe drawings for a day. And we needn't go into the reason for all that, because this was something else. I was always having visitors of one kind or another. But I asked my agent to open this package, and it was nothing to do with them at all. It was a package that they had received again from America, and the owner, the writer of the package, or the sender of the package, wanted to provide me with papers of his own that he had constructed based on sacred geometry and with philosophical inclusions that were of a very high order. Now, those were sent on to me. And at the time, my domestic arrangements were such that I could not get involved with anybody else to do with my researches. I was so busy at the time, I could not do that. So I got my agent to send an acknowledgement, thanking them for their contribution, but it was left at that. And I did not hear from that person for another 2.5 years. But then I did. And on this occasion, the writer had presented me with what we call the 9 windows. I've referred to them in video 1. And this was something that he wanted me to have. And so it was sent or delivered to my agent in London, and eventually I collected it on a day trip to London. Now, that was at the beginning of 2017. And I have to say that since that time, it was quite clear that the sender was somebody who really was extremely interested in the interpretation of any of my work that had appeared either in book form or on television. And he had seen, apparently, he had seen that program in America. It had been made in 2013, but he had seen it in 2016. It was shown in America. I did not know that. I wasn't aware of how often it was being seen and shown elsewhere. But he had seen it, and he was determined to make sure that he made me aware of his own work. Now, eventually he did, at his insistence, from 2017, when I first received proper communications, he did visit here. It was 2020, So it's sometime later. And in the process, in between those times, from 2019, we did communicate by telephone or by correspondence and emails at the time. Now, this is where I find it absolutely crucial to share it with you, because I did not know, and neither could he have known, and neither could anybody have known, but he came from the same area as where Bruce Burgess, the producer of the film that I gave an interview for, and he had seen it, and nobody could have known that. Nobody could, but he lived in the same place. He lived in the same area. Now, I find that, and so do we all that are involved with my work, find it absolutely incredible that he came from the same area as the producer of the film that I had been in, and that he had seen from that area in America. He could not have known about the producer's work, and neither could I. And so I'm saying this because we have remained in constant touch, and he shares some of the most idealistic ambitions of me, and he has become even almost part of that. And he wishes to be known as the carpenter. And I found that quite incredible anyway, because, but apparently it was a name he acquired by his family, who were very much involved with that kind of professionalism. They conducted that kind of business where the carpenter's name was quite commonplace, and he was called the carpenter from a very young age. Now, I want to stop there, this part of the thing, because I've introduced him to you today, and I will be talking a little more about it when I discuss the painting that is really going to be a real study later. So I want to pause there in reflecting about him, except to say that he is very well aware of my program and the journey that he's taken, because of his initial beginnings of contact with me. Now, finally, for today, I've shared the summary of certain people that have joined me along my journey. Most of them are no longer with us, and this is why I regard them as almost martyrs that are helping me along the way now. But I have to mention and close this program by mentioning two others. I do not do this with any degree of arrogance, because I feel very humbled by it. I want to introduce you to the named person, Dr. Bill McCann. And he was responsible for a lot of the radar work on the globe when it was being structured and rebuilt in London. He worked for the Clark Laboratory in the Museum of London, and he was a radar expert. And he was the person that I employed to do radar work for me in Tinton, to do with St. Michael's Church. And he eventually went to live and work in a university in China. And in 2019, he left China, but before he did, he's no longer with us, by the way, he was writing a series under the Nutshell Histories, and he wrote a book, or edited a book, which is called The Lives of the Queens of England, Volume 7. And before he left, he, as I say, edited the Queens of England, Volume 7, and he decided to dedicate it to me, to Joy Hancox, who has also wielded a magnifying glass with surprising results. He returned to England and died a few months later. And in paying my respects to some of the people that I've already mentioned, I would like to pay my respects to Bill McCann for all the work that he did for me. And secondly, I want to finish up this programme by talking about an extraordinary other book, which is called Squaring the Circle, and this is by James Allen Egan, and you will see from it that this is the proof copy. And this actually, this book was again dedicated to me. This is one of my drawings, and this is about the John Dee's connection with the Globe Theatre, and you can see some of the drawings that I discussed on the programme that I've already talked about with Bruce Burgess. In the next book that he chose, he is talking specifically about somebody who is central to the painting that I'm going to talk about next. Now that is absolutely uncanny as well, because he had not seen the Messenger book at the time that he wrote that. Perhaps I should say, and I'm really very humbly saying it, because I had no idea that this book was in preparation. I did not know anything about it until I received the draft copy. But the whole book is based on my interpretation of the Globe as I saw it, and as is produced in the Byrom collection and in the following book, Kingdom for a Stage, and based on, in fact, he's used one of the photographs that was used in Bruce Burgess's programme. I have to say that, but the whole book is dedicated to me, and in fact is my interpretation of the Vischer drawing that I had models made of based on my own drawings, and he has taken my drawings and taken them and analysed them in his own way, and it's a very spectacular book, and it is available for those that wish to purchase it now. But the follow-up book to this is, as I say, because I wondered how on earth he had acquired some of the knowledge that he uses in the book. But he is based in Newport in America, and I have to say that the allegory that I'm going to talk about seriously next is he references some person that is central to that painting. He could not know that when he wrote that book. And again, this is absolutely extraordinary in my opinion. And so he dedicated that book to me, and I treasure it. The journey that I am taking, and I will carry on as long as I can, introducing aspects and facets of a journey where I have met the most incredible people, and they have contacted me to share whatever they felt was important to me along that journey. I really earnestly hope that people that choose to watch this program will say that it is within us all to spot the fact that our life on this planet is by no means as simple as we think. It is very, very precious, and we should treasure every moment. Thank you for watching.